None of them had survived. 47 civilizations. 47 worlds. Some had fought bravely. Some had surrendered quickly. Some had tried to hide. None of it had mattered. The war chamber of the Aurelian Dominion was carved into the heart of a black mountain on their capital world. A circular hall of dark metal and polished stone where the greatest commanders in history had planned the conquest of entire civilizations. The room was cold. It was always cold. The Aurelians believed comfort dulled the mind. Cold kept officers sharp. Cold reminded them that power required discipline. High Commander Valder stood at the center of the chamber, his tall silver form illuminated by the soft blue glow of a holographic star map floating above the central table. Around him sat 40 senior officers, generals, admirals, conquerors. Each of them had personally commanded the fall of at least one world. For 3,000 years, the Aurelian Dominion had expanded across the Orion arm of the galaxy. Valder raised a long finger and tapped a distant system on the holographic map. A small yellow star expanded in the display. Orbiting it was a single blue world. Unremarkable, quiet, almost peaceful. This, Valder said calmly, is the Sol system. The officers leaned forward slightly. The hologram zoomed closer. The blue world filled the air above the table. White clouds drifted across deep oceans and scattered continents. General Threx tilted his head. A water world. Partially, said an intelligence officer from the far side of the table. 30% land mass. The hologram rotated slowly. Green forests, brown deserts, polar ice, cities glowing faintly along coastlines. The intelligence officer continued reading from his tablet. The dominant species calls the planet Earth. A few officers exchanged glances. The name meant nothing to them. That was normal. The Dominion had discovered thousands of inhabited systems during its expansion. Most species were forgotten within a decade of their defeat. What is the species designation? Asked Admiral Corvin. Biological classification, Homo sapiens. Common name, humans. The room remained quiet. Valder nodded. Summary. The intelligence officer spoke with the detached tone of someone reading weather data. Humans possess no psionic capability. A few officers smiled slightly. Among advanced civilizations, psionic ability was common. It allowed telepathic coordination, faster decision-making, and battlefield awareness. A species without it was automatically considered primitive. They are physically fragile. Their skeletal structure is thin. Their skin tears easily. Their internal organs are poorly protected. He paused briefly. They bleed. General Threx leaned back in his chair. Charming. Average lifespan, 80 Earth years. Several officers laughed quietly. Most Aurelians lived 3 centuries. Technological level. Pre-interstellar. Primitive propulsion systems. Chemical rockets. Early fusion research. Limited orbital infrastructure. The officer raised one final chart. But the species has one unusual characteristic. Valder tilted his head slightly. Explain. They are deeply divided. The holographic display changed. Thousands of small red markers appeared across the planet. Humans are organized into more than 100 independent political entities. Currently, there are over 2,000 active military conflicts on the planet. General Threx laughed openly. They are fighting each other? Constantly. Admiral Corvin shook his head. So we are discussing the conquest of a species that cannot even unify its own world. Correct. Valder studied the planet silently. Then he turned back to the room. This world sits on a mineral belt containing high concentrations of iridium, palladium, and trichor crystalline compounds. The extraction value alone would supply 3 Dominion fleets for 15 cycles. Now the room showed real interest. Resources always mattered. That, Valder said calmly, is why we are here. He folded his hands behind his back. Earth is not a threat. It is an opportunity. Several commanders nodded. This was familiar. The Dominion's expansion had always followed the same pattern. Find a planet. Assess the species. Neutralize resistance. Harvest resources. Move on. Simple. Efficient. Routine. General Threx spoke again. How large is the population? Approximately 8 billion. The general shrugged. Then the Third Spear Fleet will be sufficient. The Third Spear Fleet. 60 warships. It had conquered 4 civilizations already. Against a primitive species, it would be overwhelming. Valder nodded once. The Third Spear Fleet will depart within 3 days. No one objected. Why would they? This was just another conquest, another world, another species that would soon disappear into the long history of the Dominion. But there was one voice in the room that had not spoken. At the far end of the chamber, partially hidden behind a column, a younger officer slowly raised his hand. His name was Analyst Saran. He was not famous. He had never commanded a fleet. He had never conquered a world. His work existed almost entirely inside data archives and intelligence reports. Valder noticed the raised hand. Yes. Saran stood carefully. Permission to speak, High Commander. Valder nodded. Granted. Saran activated a smaller holographic display beside him. Charts appeared. Historical timelines. War records. Statistical models. I have reviewed all collected intelligence on the humans over the last 3 years. General Threx sighed dramatically. Get to the point. Saran ignored him. Most of the data confirms the standard assessment. Humans are physically weak. Their technology is inferior. Their society is fragmented. He paused. But there is something in their history that does not fit any model I have seen. A few officers looked mildly interested. Valder watched silently. Saran zoomed in on a timeline. Human wars filled the screen. Hundreds of them. Thousands. When most civilizations suffer catastrophic losses, they collapse. Economic ruin. Population decline. Cultural fragmentation. He looked around the room. Humans do not behave that way. He highlighted a major conflict near the center of the timeline. Approximately 80 Earth years ago, 2 of their largest nations fought a war that killed more than 60 million people. Cities burned. Economies collapsed. By every model we use to predict civilizational death, this should have been the end. He zoomed forward. Within 20 years, both nations had rebuilt completely. Within 30, they had developed weapons capable of destroying their entire planet. Within 50, they were reaching for the stars. General Threx rolled his eyes. So they nearly destroyed themselves. Yes. Saran looked directly at him. And then they built more weapons. The room fell silent. Valder studied the young analyst carefully. You are suggesting this primitive species is dangerous? Saran chose his words with precision. I am saying this. He gestured to the thousands of wars on the timeline. Every civilization we have conquered had a moment where they stopped fighting. I searched 6,000 years of human history. He let the silence land. I could not find that moment. The room was quiet. Then General Threx laughed. A deep, amused laugh. You've been reading too many alien psychology reports, analyst. Several officers chuckled. Valder watched Saran for another second. Your concerns will be noted. Saran knew what that meant. They would not change anything. Valder turned back to the room. The Third Spear Fleet departs in 3 days. He gestured toward the blue planet. Prepare for the conquest of Earth. The officers began to stand. Orders already forming in their minds. Fleet movements. Resource allocation. Extraction schedules. The war chamber slowly emptied. But Analyst Saran remained where he stood. The holographic image of Earth still floated in front of him. A small blue world. Quiet. Fragile. He stared at the human war records again. Thousands of conflicts. Thousands of recoveries. One sentence from a translated human history text echoed in his mind. A sentence he had read only hours earlier. He whispered it quietly to himself. They never stop. The lights in the chamber dimmed as the last officers left. 3 days later, the Third Spear Fleet departed the Dominion staging world of Kareth. 60 warships slid silently out of the orbital docks, their hulls catching the pale light of the system's star. Massive engines ignited in coordinated sequence, glowing with controlled blue energy. At the center of the formation was the fleet flagship Imperius, a vessel nearly 20 kilometers long, its hull layered with adaptive armor, its shield generators capable of withstanding the bombardment of entire planetary defense grids. Its primary weapon, the Stellar Lance, had once shattered a moon during a demonstration. Commander Darvik stood on the bridge with his hands clasped behind his back. An experienced officer. 3 successful conquests already. He had personally overseen the surrender of the Yalari Union and the dismantling of their orbital defenses. Earth would be easier. Much easier. He glanced at the tactical display. The Sol system glowed faintly at the edge of the star map. Estimated arrival, 18 days. But thousands of light years away, in a quiet office on the Dominion throne world, Analyst Saran was still reading. His room was filled with floating data screens. Human history scrolled endlessly across them. Wars, revolutions, disasters, recoveries. The deeper he looked, the more uncomfortable the data became. He zoomed in on the event they called World War II. More than 70 million dead. Entire cities reduced to ash. Economies shattered. By every known model of civilization collapse, humanity should have entered a dark age lasting centuries. Instead, factories multiplied. Technologies accelerated. Within 50 years, they had begun exploring their solar system. Saran leaned back in his chair. Impossible, he murmured. He opened another screen. Human disaster records. Pandemics. Famine. Environmental collapse. Each one devastating. Each one followed by recovery. Sometimes even growth. The worse the crisis, the faster the human response. Then he opened a translated human military archive. A speech given by a human leader during what their records called their darkest hour. He read it once. Then again. We will fight on the beaches. We will fight on the landing grounds. We will fight in the fields and in the streets. Saran sat with that for a long time. Another quote appeared. From an ordinary soldier. The enemy thinks we're finished. That's when the real fight begins. He closed his eyes. Every civilization the Dominion had ever conquered shared one common behavior. Eventually, they surrendered. It might take months, sometimes years, but the moment always came. The moment when survival instinct overpowered resistance. The moment when a species understood it could not win. Humans did not show that moment anywhere in their history. Saran opened a new report window. Threat assessment, humanity. He began typing. Human civilization displays extreme resilience under catastrophic conditions. Historical data indicates repeated survival following events that should have resulted in societal collapse. Humans adapt to crisis environments with unusual speed. Technological advancement frequently accelerates during wartime. He paused. Then he typed one final line. Stared at it. Read it 3 times. Conclusion. Humanity may not possess a standard psychological surrender threshold. He stared at that sentence for a long time. Then he transmitted the report to high command. Hours passed. No response came. That was expected. Meanwhile, far across the void, the Third Spear Fleet continued its journey. On day 12 of the expedition, Earth now filled the forward display of the Imperious. A bright blue world spinning slowly beneath white clouds. Beautiful. Fragile. Small. Resistance projections? Darvik asked. Low probability, the tactical officer replied. Human military technology is several centuries behind ours. Darvik allowed himself a small smile. 2 hours later, they received a transmission from the planet. Unidentified vessels approaching the Sol system. Identify yourselves and state your intentions. The bridge grew quiet. Darvik chuckled. Do not respond. 6 hours after that, a second transmission arrived. Shorter. The officer read it slowly. We do not know who you are. A pause. But if you intend harm to this planet. The bridge officers looked at one another. We will defend ourselves. Darvik stared at the words for a moment. Then he laughed. A deep, amused laugh. Defend themselves? Against 60 Dominion warships. He shook his head. Primitive optimism. He turned back to the star map. Continue advance. Back on the throne world, High Commander Valther received Analyst Saran's report. He skimmed the opening pages. Then he reached the conclusion. Humanity may not possess a standard psychological surrender threshold. Valther frowned slightly, closed the report, placed it on the edge of his desk. There were more important matters to attend to. Fleet movements, border disputes, resource allocations. Earth was already being handled. He turned off the screen. The Third Spear Fleet entered the Sol system without resistance. 60 warships dropped out of jump space at the outer edge of the system in perfect formation. Their arrival produced a ripple in local space-time that briefly disturbed the orbits of several distant asteroids. Then everything became quiet. Commander Darvik watched the tactical display. The system unfolded before him. Outer gas giants. Rocky inner planets. A bright yellow star burning steadily at the center. And somewhere deeper inside, Earth. Set course for the third planet. The fleet moved inward. Hours passed. No weapons fire. No interception attempts. No defensive fleets waiting in ambush. Exactly as expected. Eventually Earth appeared on the long-range sensors. Cities sparkled faintly on the dark side of the globe. Cloud systems drifted lazily across continents. Orbital defenses? Minimal. Several hundred satellites, mostly communications and weather systems. Military, very limited. Darvik almost looked disappointed. Then the sensors flickered. Commander, detecting multiple launches from the planet. A new holographic window appeared. Hundreds of small signals rising from Earth's surface. Missiles, rockets, spacecraft. Primitive propulsion trails burned through the upper atmosphere. Several officers chuckled. Darvik leaned on the console. Let them come. The fleet closed within 1 million kilometers of Earth. The human craft were still far away. Too far to matter. Then the sensor officer frowned. Commander, detecting gravitational fluctuations. Explain. I'm not sure. Several new readings appeared. Energy distortions. Strange signals. Localized space-time disturbances. The tactical officer leaned closer to his screen. That shouldn't be possible. Before anyone could answer, the first Dominion warship exploded. The ship Vanguard Talon vanished in a sudden flash of white light. No warning. No incoming weapons detected. One moment it existed. The next it was gone. The bridge fell silent. Report. Ship destroyed, Commander. How? I don't know. Another flash of light. A second Dominion cruiser disintegrated. Then a third. Then a fourth. Panic crept into the bridge. Commander. Multiple unknown energy spikes. Darvik slammed his hand on the console. Locate the source. We can't. More explosions. Ships disappeared across the fleet formation. The holographic map filled with red warning signals. All ships raised shields. Shields already active. Another warship vanished. Then another. Darvik felt something cold spreading through his chest. This wasn't possible. Dominion ships had survived neutron bombardments, planetary defense cannons, star flares. Yet something in this empty region of space was destroying them effortlessly. Scan the human craft, Darvik ordered. Could they be? No, Commander. The sensor officer shook his head. The human vessels are still thousands of kilometers away. More flashes. More ships gone. Commander, we are detecting artificial gravity wells. Darvik stared at the display. Small distortions appeared around several Dominion ships. Artificial? Yes. The officer swallowed. Their minds. The realization hit the bridge all at once. The humans had seeded the approach vector. Thousands of invisible traps hidden in space. Each mine generating a localized gravity spike powerful enough to tear a warship apart. Why weren't they detected? They're dormant until triggered. Another Dominion cruiser detonated. The fleet was flying directly into a massive minefield. All ships break formation. Emergency maneuvering. But it was already too late. The fleet had been traveling in tight formation. Exactly the pattern the humans would expect. Ships collided with gravity mines one after another. Each detonation ripping another hole in the Dominion formation. Bridge alarms screamed. Hull damage reports poured in. Red markers filled the screen. Ships disappearing. Exploding. Vanishing into warped space. All around them, the silent vacuum had become a battlefield. And the humans still hadn't fired a single shot. Then the communications officer shouted, Commander, human vessels are accelerating. Hundreds of human ships. Still primitive compared to Dominion warships, but moving with surprising speed. Closing the distance. Darvik narrowed his eyes. Prepare weapons. The first Dominion fleet in 3,000 years had entered a battle it did not understand. And for the first time, Commander Darvik began to suspect something was very wrong. The battle lasted less than 2 hours. By the time the last Dominion transmission was received from the Imperius, the Third Spear Fleet had already ceased to exist as a functioning force. Fragments of ships drifted through the darkness. Burning hull sections. Detached weapon arrays. Shattered engines. The once perfect formation of 60 Dominion warships had become a field of silent wreckage orbiting the distant blue planet. Then, nothing. No distress calls. No surrender signal. No victory transmission. Just silence. 3 weeks later, on the Dominion throne world of Aurelia, the silence began to attract attention. Relay Officer Tereth worked the night rotation at one of the Dominion's outer communication stations. Her job was simple. Monitor incoming fleet transmissions. Record updates. Flag anomalies. Quiet work. Routine work. On the 22nd day after the Third Spear Fleet departed, Tereth noticed something strange. She stared at the incoming signal logs. Then checked them again. Then a third time. The Third Spear Fleet had conquered 4 worlds before. Each conquest followed the same pattern. First contact, planetary pacification. Then the victory confirmation broadcast, a standardized transmission sent automatically once orbital control had been achieved. The signal always arrived within 4 days. This time, nothing had arrived. She filed a small report. Fleet communication delay, unusual. It was forwarded to her supervisor. And for 2 more days, it sat unread on a desk. When the report finally reached Dominion High Command, the first reaction was irritation. General Threx glanced over the message with mild annoyance. Darvik forgot to file the victory broadcast. He tossed the report aside. Send a reminder. A priority signal was transmitted toward the Sol system. A direct command channel. Third Spear Fleet. Confirm planetary pacification status. Hours passed. Then days. No reply came back. Now the irritation began turning into something heavier. Something uncomfortable. High Commander Valther received the update personally. He stood in the war chamber staring at the star map. The Sol system glowed quietly on the display. He turned to the communications officer. Send another signal. This time the Dominion used an emergency priority channel. The loudest signal their network could produce. A communication burst powerful enough to punch through solar radiation and electromagnetic storms. The message burned through space. Again, nothing returned. No signal. No data. No fleet. Just silence. The war chamber felt colder than usual. Valther turned slowly. Where is Analyst Saran? Saran arrived within minutes. He walked into the war chamber calmly, but his eyes were already focused on the Sol system marker glowing above the table. The room was filled with officers now. Generals, admirals, strategists. Everyone sensed something was wrong. Valther gestured toward the display. The Third Spear Fleet is not responding. Saran nodded slowly. I noticed. General Threx folded his arms. This is a communications malfunction. Saran didn't answer immediately. He stepped closer to the holographic display, studied the system coordinates, then looked back. The relay network is functioning normally. So, there is simply nothing transmitting from that location. The room fell silent. General Threx snorted. That is impossible. Valther remained expressionless. What do you suggest? Send reconnaissance probes. 20 probes were launched toward the Sol system. Each one accelerated to near relativistic speed. Their journey would take 19 days. The Dominion waited. 19 days later, only one probe returned. It arrived damaged. The small craft drifted into the docking bay with part of its hull partially melted. No weapon impact marks, no radiation damage, just scorched metal. The probe's memory core was fractured, not destroyed, but badly corrupted. It took an entire team of engineers 12 hours to recover the remaining data. When they finally succeeded, the footage was immediately transmitted to the throne world. The war chamber filled quickly. Every senior officer of the Dominion was present. No one spoke as the recovered video began playing. The image flickered. The probe's sensors struggled to stabilize. Then the view cleared, and the room went completely silent. Floating in the darkness of space were the remains of the Third Spear Fleet. Dozens of shattered warships. Broken hulls drifting slowly around Earth's orbit. The destruction was total. Not a single intact Dominion vessel remained. General Threx whispered, "That can't be real." The footage continued. The probe drifted closer to the wreckage. Fragments of ships rotated slowly in zero gravity. Weapon systems, hull plates, engines, all destroyed. But that wasn't the part that froze the room. Moving among the wreckage were small figures. Human figures. They floated through space wearing bulky suits. They carried tools, cutting equipment, scanning devices. One human sliced open the hull of a Dominion cruiser. Another removed components from a plasma cannon. A third carefully placed pieces into a small cargo shuttle. They worked calmly, methodically, like engineers dismantling old machinery. They were not scavenging randomly. They were studying, learning, understanding. The footage skipped. The probe drifted closer to Earth. Below the cloud layer, lights covered entire regions of the planet. New lights, massive construction zones, factories, shipyards, cities glowing brighter than before. Whatever the humans were building, they had started quickly, and they were not stopping. The video froze. Saran watched the officers around him carefully. He had already seen the footage once. He had spent hours analyzing it. But the reaction in the room was exactly what he expected. Shock, disbelief, Fear. High Commander Valder finally spoke. How long ago did this happen? The lead technician answered quietly. Based on probe travel time and debris position, the fleet was destroyed approximately 30 days ago. 30 days. 30 days for the humans to begin dismantling 60 Dominion warships. 30 days to start building something new. General Threx spoke again. His voice sounded very different now. How did they destroy them? Saran answered. We don't know yet. He gestured toward the frozen image of the humans working in space. But look at what they're doing. The officers stared. They are not celebrating. Saran continued. They are not mourning. He pointed to the cutting tools in the humans' hands. They are learning. He took a slow breath. And they are learning very fast. The room felt smaller now. More crowded. More tense. Valder turned away from the display. He walked slowly toward the tall window overlooking the capital city of Aurelia. Lights glittered across the horizon. 3,000 years of conquest. 47 civilizations defeated. The Dominion had never lost a fleet. Not once. He stood there for a long moment. Then he spoke without turning around. Saran. Yes, Commander. I want a full threat analysis. Everything we know about this species. Saran nodded slowly. I already started it. When will it be ready? Saran glanced once more at the frozen footage. Tomorrow. No one in the war chamber laughed. No one said a word. Because everyone in that room had just realized something. The Dominion had not conquered Earth. The Dominion had just discovered an enemy it did not understand. Saran's report was delivered to High Commander Valder the following morning. 41 pages. But the first page contained only a single sentence. Valder read it slowly. Then he read it again. Human civilization does not collapse under pressure. It accelerates. The rest of the report was data. Historical records. Military analysis. Psychological studies. Patterns of human behavior stretching across thousands of years. Saran had organized it differently from normal Dominion intelligence files. Instead of starting with technology or military strength, he started with history. Stone tools. Early agriculture. The first cities. The first wars. Saran described how humans had spread across their entire planet without advanced technology. They had crossed frozen continents, sailed oceans in wooden ships, climbed mountains, survived deserts. They had adapted to environments that should have killed them. But the most important sections were about war. Dominion warfare was clean. Two fleets met. One side won. The other surrendered. Human warfare was different. Human wars expanded. Entire populations mobilized. Factories became weapons plants. Civilians became engineers, medics, pilots. Every resource redirected toward survival. Humans had a phrase for it. Total war. Saran had included a translated quote from a human military strategist. War is not about surviving the battle. It's about outlasting the enemy. Valder finished the report in silence. Then he closed the file. Across the room, Saran waited. You believe this species cannot be defeated, Valder said. Saran shook his head. No. Valder raised an eyebrow. I believe they can be defeated, Saran said carefully. But not the way we are planning to defeat them. Valder walked slowly to the window again. Outside, the capital city stretched across the horizon. For 3,000 years the Dominion had ruled this region of space. No empire had challenged them successfully. No civilization had stopped their expansion. But 60 warships had just been destroyed. And the enemy was already building more weapons from the wreckage. Valder spoke quietly. The Dominion cannot appear weak. Saran said nothing. If we withdraw, Valder continued, every rival power in the quadrant will see it. And they will test us. He returned to the table. We will not withdraw. Saran expected that answer. What will you do? Valder activated the central display. A massive fleet formation appeared above the table. 200 warships, battleships, carriers, orbital bombardment platforms, siege vessels designed to crack planetary crusts. The Obliteration Armada, Valder said. Saran felt the room grow colder. The Obliteration Armada had only been deployed twice in Dominion history. Once against a species that had destroyed 3 Dominion colonies. Once against a civilization that had attempted to develop planet-killing weapons. Both worlds no longer existed. This is unnecessary, Saran said quietly. Valder looked at him. If we open communication, Saran said, we may be able to. No. The word cut through the room like a blade. I will not negotiate with a species that destroyed 60 Dominion warships. Saran held his ground. If we attack again, they will be ready. They are already ready, Valther replied. He gestured toward the fleet formation. That is why we are not sending 60 ships. The hologram expanded. 200 warships filled the chamber with light. We are sending everything. Saran stared at the display. 200 warships. Planet-cracking weapons. Orbital bombardment arrays. It was no longer a conquest mission. It was extermination. What about the inhabitants? Saran asked quietly. Valther's voice was calm. They will be removed with the planet. Saran felt a weight settle in his chest. 8 billion lives. Gone. Because the Dominion could not accept defeat. Valther continued. There is one more element. He tapped another command. 12 figures appeared on the hologram. Elite warriors. Dominion legends. The most feared operatives in the Empire. They are called the Warborn. Every Dominion officer had heard of them. Genetically enhanced. Trained for decades. They could survive environments that killed entire armies. They could dismantle governments from the inside. In 3 previous deployments, they had personally ended entire civilizations. These 12 will deploy to Earth ahead of the main bombardment, Valther explained. They will eliminate the human command structure. Once their leadership collapses, the Armada will burn the planet from orbit. Saran spoke carefully. And if the humans do not collapse? Valther looked at him. Then he gave the same answer the Dominion had given for 3,000 years. Everything collapses eventually. The Obliteration Armada assembled over the next 7 days. Shipyards across the Dominion worked without pause. Battleships detached from border patrols. Siege vessels came out of long-term storage. Carriers loaded thousands of fighters. 200 warships gathered in orbit above Aurelia. The largest military force the Dominion had fielded in centuries. From the observation deck of the command station, Saran watched them. Massive shapes drifting in silent formation. Beautiful. Terrifying. A fleet built to erase worlds. General Threx stood beside him. You still think the humans are special? Saran did not answer immediately. He looked at the ships. Then he looked at the distant stars. They destroyed 60 warships in less than a day. Threx shrugged. Luck. Saran shook his head. No. What then? They learned. Saran looked back at the fleet. And they have had 30 days since then. Threx stopped laughing. Far above them, the 200 warships began moving. Engines ignited. Jump drives activated. The Obliteration Armada prepared to depart. Saran watched the ships disappear one by one into the glowing tunnels of faster-than-light travel. He remembered a line from his own report. A line he had written weeks earlier. A line that now felt heavier than before. Humans fight hardest when they believe they have no choice. Saran looked toward the stars. Somewhere out there, a small blue planet was waiting. And the Dominion was about to discover something important. Humans had already decided. They were not surrendering. The Obliteration Armada arrived at the edge of the Sol system without warning. 200 Dominion warships dropped out of jump space in perfect formation, their arrival bending local space with a violent ripple that scattered nearby asteroids like dust. For a moment, the stars seemed to tremble. Then the fleet stabilized. Admiral Corvin stood on the command bridge of the Dominus Rex, staring at the tactical display. The Sol system appeared before him. Quiet. Empty. No ships. No defenses. Just the distant glow of the inner planets orbiting their star. Corvin allowed himself a small smile. So, he said calmly, the humans have learned fear. No hostile contacts detected. Corvin folded his hands behind his back, advanced toward the third planet. The massive armada moved forward. 200 warships gliding deeper into the system. The outer planets passed silently beneath their sensors. No ambush. No hidden fleets. No attacks. Behind him, the 12 Warborn stood near the rear of the command deck. They had arrived quietly. No ceremony. No introductions. Each one carried the quiet reputation of someone who had already ended worlds. Their leader was a tall figure named Kale. He watched the star map without speaking. Corvin noticed him. You have read the intelligence reports? Kale nodded once. And? Kale considered the question. Humans are unusual. Corvin chuckled. They are primitive. Kale said nothing. The fleet continued inward. They crossed the orbit of Mars. Still no resistance. Estimated arrival at Earth? 3 hours. Prepare the Warborn for deployment. Each would descend to a different location. Command centers. Military headquarters. Satellite control facilities. Their mission was simple. decapitate the human command structure. Once leadership collapsed, the Armada would burn the planet from orbit. Clean, efficient, final. Then something changed. The sensor officer leaned forward. Admiral, I'm detecting objects. How many? The officer hesitated. A lot. Signals began appearing across the tactical map. First dozens, then hundreds, then thousands. What are those? Ships. The display magnified the incoming fleet. Hundreds of vessels rising from the shadows of the inner planets. From behind moons. From asteroid belts. From hidden orbital positions. Corvin leaned closer. These are not the ships we encountered before. They're larger. Their hulls were sharper, stronger. Sections of their designs looked familiar. Enhanced the hull structure. The image sharpened. And suddenly it was obvious. Parts of the ships were built from Dominion technology. Armor plating, energy conduits, weapon mounts, all taken from the wreckage of the Third Spear Fleet. But they had not simply copied it. They had changed it, improved it, rebuilt it. Corvin whispered quietly. They redesigned our ships. The human fleet continued approaching. Hundreds of vessels moving in tight formations. Fast, extremely fast. Admiral, the tactical officer said slowly. They're coordinating across the entire fleet. How? I don't know. Signals flashed between the human ships constantly. Data, targeting information, damage reports. Everything shared instantly. The entire fleet reacting like a single organism. Corvin straightened. All ships' battle stations. The Armada formed defensive lines. Weapons charging. Shields rising. The human fleet kept coming. Then the battle began. The first wave came from below the orbital plane. Human strike ships launched from hidden positions in the asteroid belt. They accelerated toward the Dominion formation at impossible speed. Intercept them. Dominion weapons fired. Energy lances burned across space. Several human ships exploded instantly, but the rest kept coming. They dodged, twisted, changed direction at the last second. Several slipped through the Dominion firing grid. One slammed directly into a Dominion cruiser. The explosion tore both ships apart. Corvin stared. They rammed us. Deliberately. The second wave arrived seconds later. Heavy human cruisers emerged from behind Earth's moon. They opened fire with strange new weapons, projectiles that warped gravity, energy bursts that disrupted Dominion shield frequencies. Corvin felt the bridge shaking. Damage reports flooded in. Shield failure on Cruiser Delta. Battleship Talon reporting hull breach. Carrier Zenith losing propulsion. The human ships kept moving. Every time one discovered a weakness in Dominion shields, every other human ship adjusted its weapons instantly, as if they shared the same mind. The battle spread across the inner solar system. Ships fighting near Earth. Ships fighting near Mars. Ships hiding in asteroid fields, ambushing Dominion vessels from unexpected angles. Hours turned into days. The Dominion Armada was larger, stronger, but the humans fought differently. Dominion ships fought like soldiers. Human ships fought like survivors. When a human ship was damaged, it did not retreat. Its crew sealed the damaged sections, redirected power, and returned to battle. On the fourth day, a Dominion destroyer crippled a human cruiser with a direct plasma strike. Half the ship's hull vanished. The cruiser drifted helplessly. Then its engines suddenly flared. Instead of retreating, the damaged cruiser accelerated directly toward the destroyer. The collision destroyed both ships, but the explosion left the destroyer's escort fleet exposed. 3 human ships attacked the gap immediately. Corvin watched the footage replay on the tactical screen. They traded their ship, he said quietly. Yes, Admiral. For a tactical advantage. Corvin felt a strange sensation in his chest. A mix of disbelief and something else. Something he hadn't expected to feel toward an enemy. Respect. The humans were not fighting to survive. They were fighting to win, and they were willing to pay any cost. The battle continued for 11 days. By the time it ended, the Obliteration Armada had lost more than half its ships. The surviving Dominion vessels were withdrawing toward the outer system, and the human fleet was still advancing. Below them, Earth turned slowly beneath the stars. A small blue world, but no longer helpless. Now it was something else, something the Dominion had never faced before. A civilization that had turned its own destruction into its greatest weapon. By the 11th day, the Dominion fleet was breaking. Admiral Corvin stood on the bridge of the Dominus Rex, watching the tactical display with growing disbelief. Red markers filled the screen. Destroyed ships. Disabled cruisers. Retreating formations. Out of 200 warships, less than 80 were still operational. And the human fleet was still fighting. They had lost ships too. Hundreds of them. Fragments of both fleets drifted through space between the planets. But every time a Dominion officer believed the humans were exhausted, another wave appeared. Another formation. Another attack. Corvin had fought wars for more than a century. He had seen desperate species fight for survival. He had never seen anything like this. On the 12th day, he gave the order. Withdraw. The command spread through the surviving ships. Dominion vessels began retreating toward the outer edge of the Sol system. But the human fleet did not chase them. They followed only as far as the orbit of the outer planets. Then they stopped, held their position, watching, guarding, as if drawing a line in space. A boundary. Corvin watched them through the bridge viewport. They're letting us leave, one officer whispered. Corvin nodded slowly. Yes. Meanwhile, on Earth, the ground war had ended hours earlier. The 12 Warborn had landed across different regions of the planet during the early days of the battle. Their mission had been simple: destroy human command structures, collapse coordination, end resistance. But the humans had prepared. They had not built stronger fortresses. They had not gathered all their leadership in one place. Instead, they had changed the rules. There was no central command. Human military forces operated in hundreds of independent networks. If one leader fell, another stepped forward. If one unit was destroyed, 3 more continued the fight. The Warborn had encountered something no previous enemy had ever done. A battlefield with no head, no center, no single point of failure. And one by one, the legendary warriors of the Dominion had fallen. 10 Warborn were confirmed dead. 1 disappeared beneath the ocean during a naval engagement. Only 1 remained. Kale. He stood now in the ruins of a shattered city. Buildings around him were burned and broken from days of fighting. Human soldiers surrounded the courtyard. Hundreds of them. Weapons raised. Exhausted. Wounded. But still standing. Kale's armor was damaged. His left arm hung uselessly at his side. Across the courtyard, a human officer stepped forward. Tall, her uniform torn from battle. A thin line of blood ran from a cut above her eye. But her voice was calm. It's over. Kale looked around slowly. He had faced impossible situations before. But this time, the calculation was clear. Even if he killed 20 soldiers, 50 more would take their place. Even if he escaped the city, thousands more waited beyond it. The human officer reached into her jacket. She removed a small sealed cylinder, walked halfway across the courtyard, and placed it gently on the broken stone ground. Take that back to your leaders. Kale stared at it. What is it? A message. He looked at her. You could kill me. Yes, she said simply. She held his gaze. But we don't need to. The soldiers around the courtyard held their weapons steady. None of them fired. None of them moved. Kale looked from face to face. Dozens of exhausted eyes staring back at him. No hatred. Only exhaustion. And beneath the exhaustion, something unbroken. He bent slowly, picked up the cylinder, turned, and walked through the line of soldiers. They stepped aside to let him pass. No one fired. No one tried to stop him. 3 days later, Kale returned to the Dominion throne world. The capital city of Aurelia had never felt so quiet. News of the battle had already spread. The Dominion had lost more ships in 12 days than in the previous 500 years combined. Kale entered the High Command chamber without ceremony. High Commander Valder waited at the center table. Saran stood nearby. General Threx and several officers lined the walls. Kale placed the cylinder on the table. Valder opened it slowly. Inside was a small data chip and a single folded document. Valder unfolded the paper. Read it silently. Then read it again. Finally, he handed it to Saran. Saran read the message carefully. It was written in clear Dominion language. Perfect translation. There were no threats. No insults. No demands for revenge. Just 3 conditions. First, the Dominion would withdraw all forces from the Sol system and recognize it as human territory. Second, the Dominion would recognize humanity as a sovereign civilization free to travel and communicate with other species. Third, 3 neighboring species currently enslaved in Dominion labor colonies would be released immediately. That was all. Saran looked up slowly. They could have demanded anything. No one disagreed. The humans had destroyed 2 fleets, defeated the Warborn, captured Dominion technology. They could have demanded territory, tribute, entire star systems. Instead, they asked for a border, recognition, and freedom for 3 other species. Valder stared at the document. Then he looked at the data chip. Play it. A star map appeared on the display. Dominion territory. Every system. Every fleet position. Every military outpost. Perfectly accurate. The humans had mapped the entire Dominion. Silence filled the chamber. Valder understood immediately. If humanity wanted war, they now had the knowledge to continue it on their own terms. But they had not chosen that path. Saran spoke quietly. They don't want conquest. Valder nodded slowly. They want peace. He walked to the side of the chamber where a ceremonial desk stood. The Dominion had not used it in centuries. Empires did not sign treaties. They issued commands. But today was different. Valder sat down. He read the message one last time. His hand paused above the document for just a moment. Then he signed. The Dominion had just done something it had never done before. It had accepted peace as the weaker power. Months later, on Earth, a city still rebuilding after the war glowed beneath the night sky. Streetlights flickered back to life across repaired neighborhoods. An 8-year-old girl sat on the front steps of her home, staring up at the stars. Her uncle walked toward her down the street. He wore a military uniform. A bag rested on his shoulder. He had been gone almost a year. She ran toward him. He lifted her into a tight hug. What were they like? She asked. The aliens. He thought about the war, the ships, the battles, the friends he had lost. Then he smiled softly. They were surprised. The girl frowned. Surprised by what? He looked up at the sky again, at the endless stars that now felt very different than they had a year ago. By us. She thought about that for a moment. Were you surprised by them? He smiled again. A little. They walked inside together. The door closed. Above them, the stars continued their slow, silent turning. The galaxy had learned something it would not soon forget. Not from the battles. Not from the fleets. Not from the destroyed armadas. What every civilization that heard the story remembered was this. After everything, after the war, after 2 fleets, after the Warborn, humanity had asked for only 3 things. And 2 of them were for someone else.